So in my opinion, once POE 2 develops an endgame at least close to that in POE 1, it will be the clearly superior game. So guys, I have this video here from Dart Microtransaction that is called Path of Exile 2 versus Path of Exile 1. And of course, I want to watch this video because you guys know that I love Path of Exile 2. I think it is a masterpiece. And I am going to play POE 1 in the 326 League. I will start developing myself in the Path of Exile 1 World 2. Because what I want is not a Path of Exile 2 versus Path of Exile 1 scenario. What I want is Path of Exile. The two games being together. And I go Path of Exile 1, 2 months. Path of Exile 2, 2 months. Path of Exile 1. And I have a wonderful year playing both games. But still, this title caught my attention and I want to see what he has to say about it. So let's go. Dude, over 60% of you are not subscribed. Why? Why are you like this? Just click the sub button, my dude. It is quick, it is easy, it is free. You get content, I get a sub, win-win situation. Just click the sub button, my dude.
All right, so this is probably the best way to explain this. On the left here, I have enjoyment. On the bottom, I have time. You're just going to have to forgive my bad handwriting. Now, what I would use this graph to show you is what Path of Exile 2 is for. Now, keep in mind, Path of Exile 2 was made to be a much wider audience on purpose. Obviously, it's cross-platform, cross-progression. They're reaching out to newer players within the genre, and they got a lot of new players. They got, like, I think they said it was 890,000 on the original launch of the early access. So because of that, they were trying to make the game more accessible and the earlier parts of the game more enjoyable for players so that they would, either get hooked earlier or you would just enjoy the game straight up from the beginning. And a lot of that started with ease of understanding the game, etc. So all that to basically say that the beginning of Path of Exile 2 starts, and you can see this pretty much from what everyone was talking about on the launch of the game, is like the enjoyment of the campaign is pretty solid experience from the beginning. There was the whole Dawn of the Hunt fiasco that happened
when Dawn of the Hunt released, people were fucking mad, dude. People were mad when Dawn of the Hunt released, dude. I don't know. I enjoyed it, but people disliked it, so what can you do?
And the beginning of the Dawn of the Hunt League would start, but for the overall purposes of Path of Exile 2, this would sort of be the campaign. It just ramps, pretty good enjoyment, good boss fights, easy enough to understand. Players can...
Awesome boss fights. In the campaign, out of any ARPG that I have played, in the campaign, it has the best boss fights.
Get through it, etc. And then you sort of hit a in-game portion and it goes up a little bit and then it sort of ramps down sort of like this. Okay, this is probably like a very standard looking bell graph. Kitty's meowing in the background of what the enjoyment looks like. You get through the campaign right about here where you get this low spike. You hit in-game for the first time and you see the Atlas and you're excited and you're like, oh wow, the Atlas, this big open world and all of that. And then you play a little bit of the maps and then, pretty quickly you hit a portion where you're like, you know what, I've done the maps. There's not a whole lot to do other than just to continue the farm for whatever reason. And your enjoyment slowly tapers off. And then you, at some point, you say, okay, that's...
Okay. I agree with some parts of this, but I also disagree with other parts of it. So I will make my own graph for this on top of his one. Okay, what I think is that POE 2, he's doing it that it starts from 0 in the campaign, right? I don't agree with that. I think it starts higher. The campaign in POE 2, from the very beginning, it's awesome. You start and you fight the Blooded Miller and it is already insane. It is already like the best fucking fight, the opening fight out of any ARPG. Yes, including POE 1, you have Hillock in POE 1. No, the Blooded Miller is better. In Diablo 4, you have that demon that you can beat with just whatever. It can't ever kill you. No, the campaign in POE 2 starts already hard as fuck. The atmosphere, the graphics, the story, it catches you right away. So the enjoyment at the start for POE 2 is high, right out of the gate. But then you get to Cruel difficulty and you have to repeat the fucking campaign in Cruel. Your enjoyment goes down because you don't want to do this shit again. So this will probably get fixed in the future when they release Act 4, Act 5, and Act 6. Because right now doing Act 1 through 3. Again, in Cruel, sucks dick, and nobody wants to do this. So it is not like negative or zero, but it is still bad. Like you are doing this as a chore because you have to do it. Now, when you go up again is when you enter maps. Now you are enjoying the game again, and I agree that you hit here, right? You are enjoying the game again, you hit maps, and you start progressing maps, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, blah, blah, blah. You get to tier 15, and the game is fucking awesome, right? You experience pinnacle content, you spike. This is, I don't know, Sesh and the King in the Mist and all that shit, you spike. But then there is the endgame in POE 2 is shallow, and you have nothing to do, and you start crashing, and you start crashing, and you start crashing, and you get bored, and you get out of the game. I think, in my opinion, this is the correct graph for POE 2. Acts 1 to 3, awesome, masterpiece, revolutionary. You have to repeat it. You are frustrated, and you just do it because it is a task. It is a chore. But then you get to maps, and the game is awesome again. And it goes up as you progress to the end game. And when you get to pinnacle content, you peak out. But when you have to repeat and repeat and repeat, you go down, 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 down.
Probably it for me for the league. I'll come back and try it on a fresh economy reset with the new league and see what really is had to be had there, because you've experienced pretty much everything the game has to offer by the time you've got through this portion of the graph. Now, this is all and fine for what I would consider sort of a consumable ARPG experience. You got a good campaign, you know, you got a early development, not completed yet in-game, which will be completed at some point here. And, you know, you get a good amount of hours and then you sort of move on. Path of Exile one's a little bit different, however. And one thing I want you to remember is that this portion here, this part that I circled here, this is all you doing all of the mechanics, all of the content in Path of Exile 2, and really, generically doing everything the game really has to offer in the in-game. And then at some point, like I said, you've consumed it all and moving on. Just remember that. Okay, now I'm going to give you a general idea of what the Path of Exile 1 graph actually looks like. You actually start down here for enjoyment. You start at a deficit already because the game is massively complex, basically, and that will come back to be a bit.
That is why it makes more sense to start POE 2 up in here so that you can start POE 1 from zero and not from under, right? But yes, that is the problem with POE 1, dude. And what I think is he's going to say in here is what we have been saying all this time. Getting into POE 1 is harder, the barrier of entry is higher because of the complexity and the systems. But once you get over that hump and you get to the end game, the game will be awesome. That is what he's going to say in here. It has the best end game out of any ARPG. And that is what differentiates it from POE 2. But then that, you know what that tells me? That when POE 2 develops the end game that POE 1 has, then POE 2 will be the superior game because you don't have these issues. Still, it will probably come one day, but still you don't have this barrier of entry in POE 2, and the campaign at the start is better, and you enjoy the game from the start. So in my opinion, once POE 2 develops an end game at least close to that in POE 1, it will be the clearly superior game. And if he's going to say that, I will have to compare this to something like, if you watch anime, you have something like One Piece and something like, I don't know, Death Note. In One Piece, what is the biggest weakness that One Piece has that everybody says? It starts really slow, the first episode suck dick, the show starts being good like in episode 60, or after episode 60, around episode 80. And people say, I have to watch fucking 80 episodes before this shit gets good. Fuck that, I am not wasting my time. That is what happens with fucking POE 1, right? But Death Note is good from the very first episode. It already grabs you. Crazy shit is happening in the very first episode. That is what happens in POE 2. But once you get going into One Piece, it is deep, it is emotional, it has fights, it has a story, arcs, it is 1,000 episodes, it is the greatest fucking anime ever. And Death Note is awesome, but 37 episodes and you're done. And halfway through, it goes down massively because something crazy happens in the middle if you have watched it. Okay? So I think these two animes are a comparison of what POE 1 and POE 2 are. what are you going to say?
Benefit later on in the conversation. But let's go ahead and address it now. If you decide to start Path of Exile 1, the rumors are true. The game is hard to understand. But it is about hardness to understand, actually, that it is its benefit, to be honest, as we go on. So the graph, let's just continue with the graph here. It's going to look sort of like this. And then as you start to get through the campaign, at some point here, you're going to start to understand it a little bit better. Your enjoyment is going to continue to go up as you understand the game. It'll be a slow bit, and you'll hit some kind of learning curves here, and they'll go down a little bit, then they'll go back up, and as you'll struggle a little bit getting through the campaign, and then at some point you're just going to have this sort of skyrocket.
I told you he was going to say that the shit gets good in the endgame, but that is the thing. You have to have the will to get there. A lot of players don't want to do that, and that is what I think GGG is trying to overcome in Path of Exile 2. They don't want this graph because they know that this graph makes players bounce off of the game and not come back. They know this. They know they have the craziest endgame ever, but they don't want this part of the graph. Now that they achieved this not being the case in POE 2, they can take this part of the graph and put it in POE 2. That should be their goal. Okay, we accomplished the game being good at the start. People like it. It is less complex. They get into the game. The campaign is fun. How do we make POE 2 as cool as POE 1 in terms of player retention, long-term goals? You put this part of the graph over in POE 2. That is what you do. I know it is hard, but that should be the goal, right? I gave POE 1 up. There's just too much things to catch up. I'll do better in POE 2. Exactly. That is what a lot of people say. But I think, and that is why I am trying it, I think that after you learn a bunch of stuff in POE 2, it is easier to get into POE 1. There is still a lot of shit that is in POE 2 that you won't understand, but at least there is a little bit of knowledge that is transferable that makes it a little bit easier. And you get less intimidated by the complexity because of the things you learned in POE 2.
Of enjoyment here. And now, obviously, if you're someone who already plays POE 1, you probably know what this point of the graph actually is. This is your representation of when you get through the game, you sort of understand, it sort of clicks a little bit in terms of what the game's actually about, and you see maps and the end game. They actually said a while back, I think it was Chris Wilson said that, if you make it to maps, Path of Exile owns your soul, and this is basically 100% correct. Now,
everybody
this is
says
not
that.
to say that the campaign of POE 1 is bad. I actually think it is, all right to good is how I...
It is mid as fuck. It is mid as fuck, dude. Like, I wouldn't play POE 1 for the campaign. I play the campaign to get to the end game. It doesn't mean I don't have fun in the campaign. It is mid because you do have fun in the campaign. But you get through the campaign to get to the end game. It is mid as fuck.
I would say in the POE 1 campaign, I think it's a lot better than a lot of the other campaigns and other ARPGs we've seen. It's more...
Which one? I think that the D4 campaign is better. Not the game. We know that D4 as a game is not better than POE 1. But the campaign is more fun, more entertaining to go through than the campaign in POE 1, dude. I know that I am going to probably get hate about this, but hey, I firmly believe it. When you say there are other ARPGs with worse campaigns, you have to give an example.
Enjoyable. I don't mind repeating it, but your first time through, it can be a little bit soul crushing because it's not easy. Okay, this is not baby's first ARPG by any means. And you're going to run into a lot of mechanics that you have to learn. Now, and the key to being able to push through this portion before we talk about what's going on here at the end of the graph is acknowledging that there is going to be a learning process in either using a build guide, watching videos. You can go in blind. That's how I tried to learn it. I went in, obviously I had the chat on my side, but other than that, I went in and just tried to learn it, and I was able to go through. But, it was a struggle. I think it was like, maybe it was 40 hours or something, like 27 deaths or something like that to get through the campaign for the first time. So if you want to tackle it yourself and try to figure out the game, Godspeed, go out and do it. But there is a lot of people out there, a lot of websites out there that have already broken down a lot of this information for you.
Dude, Pogs, Rightus Fire, Chieftain, you have everything that you need over there. You have everything you need over there. If you want to get into POE 1, write to Fire Chieftain Pox. He's going to explain everything to you like if you were a baby, which is the correct way to do it, by the way, when you are trying to get someone into POE 1.
And that
So yes, there are resources out there to help you. Some people don't like the fact that you have to go to Path of Building and a loot filter and this and trade website and a bunch of bullshit to play the game outside of the game. Yeah. But once you get used to it, it is not that bad.
can explain to you a lot of the basics. And honestly, if you have played PoE 2, you're not as much of at a deficit because at least you understand, for instance, like what the support gym is. And
I said that. I said exactly that. That is why it is better you play PoE 2, you get into some of the systems, and then you play PoE 1 and you don't start in a deficit. I said exactly that, dude.
some of the mechanics that you'll run into in the in-game are still in Path of Exile 1. You understand the basics of some of the currency orbs, etc. There is just a lot more options in Path of Exile 1 that have yet to be delivered in Path of Exile 2. So because of the amount and quantity of things there are to learn in the game, you're going to feel a little bit behind, which I know probably doesn't sound like a good sales pitch, but that's where we come to. It's because of this portion that allows this portion to happen. If you get through the campaign, you get the in-game and you see how the mapping system works, which is, just instance mapping, very similar to how it works in Path of Exile 2, then you're going to realize that the Atlas tree in Path of Exile 1 is significantly different than it was in Path of Exile 2. You remember?
And it is better, by the way. I told you guys this several days ago. I played a little bit on the standard league in Path of Exile 1 to see the Atlas tree. And the Atlas tree in Path of Exile 1 is vastly superior to the Atlas tree in Path of Exile 2. I wished Path of Exile 2 had an Atlas tree like PoE 1. I know that it is not entirely possible because of all the different mechanics that exist in PoE 1 that don't exist in PoE 2. But still, if you only include the mechanics in Path of Exile 2, you can still make a similar Atlas tree to that in PoE 1. It is clear that they are going with a different philosophy in the tree in PoE 2, and I prefer the philosophy in PoE 1. I think the Atlas tree in PoE 1 is just better. Not because it has more stuff, because of the way it works. You can tell me whatever you want. I just think the PoE 1 tree is better, and the PoE 2 tree can learn a lot of shit from the PoE 1 tree.
Remember how I said in Path of Exile 2, you sort of do all of the content? This isn't really the same way in Path of Exile 1. When you get to the in-game in Path of Exile 1, you start to gain Atlas points. You're going to find one of the league mechanics that you actually really enjoy, and you're going to be specializing more into it. So it's instead of like, I'm just doing this map and it happens to have, Breach and the Delirium, I just do all of them. And you get sort of fatigue of just doing the only mechanics that are in the game over and over and over again. You find one you really like. For instance, this was Blight for me, which is effectively a tower defense game. They
based. Blight is fucking awesome.
have almost like mini games built into it. Now, this might be a bad example because a lot of people don't like in PoE 2, but you know how in PoE 2 there's the Trials of Sekima, right? Which is almost
fuck the trial of the suck my ass. All my homies hate that shit.
It's like a different style of game. It's like a roguelite. See, Path of Exile 1 has a lot of these types of things. That's like why I was mentioning Blight, the tower defense, built into it. They have a heist. They have like betrayal. There's a ton of league mechanics that are built into it. And they even brought a mercenary system in for the league that is starting tomorrow on Friday. And that was the original thing that sucked me into Path of Exile so much, just realizing that by the time you actually get to the end game, there is a whole world of content, not only for you to learn, but to decide the ones you want to ignore and specialize into the ones you like. If in Path of Exile 2, let's say you really like Ritual for some reason, but you hate the other ones. You hate doing Expedition. I mean, for me, it's the opposite. But let's say you love Ritual and you hate doing Expedition. Well, in Path of Exile 1, the concept of the game and the way the Atlas tree is much more about specializing.
And they should, by the way, they should implement this in PoE 2, brother. They should implement this in PoE 2. I am starting to understand why people hate towers.
Into the ones that you actually care about more. So you feel like you have a little bit more player agency. And player agency is sort of a consistent theme in Path of Exile 1 of being able to build with the skill you want to build, on the maps you want to do, with the mechanics you want to do, farming the bosses you want to do. This is sort of a difference between POE 2, where you're trying to defeat what the game has laid out in front of you, and in POE 1, you're almost laying out the tracks in front of you as you're going to choose the direction you want to go. This is a very generic overlook view of it, but this is effectively one of their best sales pitches of the game. Now, if you're still with me, I'm going to try to wrap this video up into a nice bow for you and put it out there. But effectively what I'm saying is, if Path of Exile 2 was a game that sort of got you into the concept of the game, and you like the game a lot, you like the support gems and, you know, getting the links on your skills, even though that's a little bit different in PoE 1. You like that there's these cool mechanics that you can kind of choose to engage.
He's trying to get people to play PoE 1, and I like this. I like this. I also want people to try PoE 1. If you liked PoE 2 and you learned a lot of stuff in PoE 2, you can now try PoE 1, brother. Trust me, it is going to be fine.
With you like boss fights, okay? You like the music, or maybe the ability to have, you know, some really cool skills that seem to pop off in the end game, okay? If you like those concepts, all right, Path of Exile 1 is the better ARPG at the moment, because all of those have been fleshed out over a number of years. I firmly believe Path of Exile 2 is maybe going to be the greatest ARPG ever. And like,
he agrees with me. He agrees with me. I told you, once you have the end game from PoE 1 in PoE 2, then it is going to be awesome, dude. It is going to be the best ever, because the campaign is the best ever. By the way, brother has 3 guitars over here, dude. I can't wait so I have money to do that shit. And an ukulele over there.
A year or two, okay? It could be my copium, but
I only have one, and it's old as fuck. It has like, I don't know, 20 years old or more.
I do actually believe that, all right? But it needs time to get there. Path of Exile 1 is sort of already cooked to that direction, but maybe you don't like the graphics or something, and it's hard for you to get into the graphics, etc. But it's the mechanics and the content that are delivered in Path of Exile 1 that hopefully will persuade you to put the fidelity parts of the game aside, since it's an older game, and actually try to dive into more of the in-game portion of it, which is where it truly shines if you can get past the learning process. But like I said, there's a million people out there with a million great guides that have already gone through and taught you a lot of that. And I will be putting out a beginner's guide on Path of Exile 1 as well. I believe that's coming.
Hey, dude, that is awesome. He's trying to get PoE 2 players to try PoE 1. And I do think that is cool. I do think that is cool, and I agree. I know that we have in here a lot of people that prefer PoE 1 and a lot of people that prefer PoE 2. It is awesome that you have your preferred game, but you guys know that I advocate for the PoE community. Let's try the other one. If you are a PoE 1 dude, try PoE 2, and if you are a PoE 2 dude, try PoE 1. Everything is going to be fine, brother. I promise.
Coming out tomorrow in order to break down some of the beginnings of it. So this is just a basic overview on why you might want to try PoE 1. That's about it. I'll be live now as of the posting of this video, and there's actually free cosmetics drop starting tomorrow with the launch of the PoE 1 League, because tomorrow, 1 p.m. Pacific, that is 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, launches the new Path of Exile 1 League. That's about it. Love y'all. See you on the live stream.
Dude, that was an awesome video, DM, dude. That was an awesome
so this
video.
is probably
Thank
the best
you
way
so much for the video, bro. It prompted us to talk about cool shit about the game. It was a cool video, dude. Thank you so much, because I do agree with the purpose behind it, which is bringing people together and trying to get PoE 2 people to try PoE 1, which is cool. So I am fine with that, dude. What do you guys think? Am I right? Am I wrong? Am I a clown? Am I a genius? Let me know everything in the comments below. I love reading comments even when they don't agree with me. Also remember to like the video, to subscribe to the channel, all that cool stuff. Guys, thanks for being here. You guys are awesome. God bless you. And remember, don't be afraid ever, because this is just a ride.